XPRIZE is kind of a sister company organization to Singularity University. Peter Diamandis is the executive chairman of both organizations, and he's the founder of the XPRIZE Foundation. So among friends and family, we wanted to give you a 20-minute update on kind of what's happening in the XPRIZE Foundation world. So I'm happy to be here and good to see a lot of familiar faces. So one of the things that we're doing over at the XPRIZE Foundation is we're taking a big evolutionary shift in how we drive impact. So historically, XPRIZE, for nearly 2 decades, has been in the nonprofit model of using incentive competitions and prize theory in crowdsourcing. Before crowdsourcing became crowdsourcing, XPRIZE for nearly 2 decades has been polishing this model and doing an exceptional job at designing and executing these large global competitions, $10, $20, $30 million global competitions to solve some of the world's biggest problems. With that perfection around that particular methodology of using incentive competitions and looking at it through a behavioral science lens, because it's a lot of incentive factors that are required to get the world community to come out and compete on an XPRIZE to solve a grand challenge. We've now broadened our scope to look and focus on not just designing and executing prizes, but actually designing and executing impact. And that's actually legitimately what the foundation's evolution we're going through. So this is not just a soundbite. This is legitimately how we're restructuring the foundation over the last year. It's kind of the next epoch of the foundation's history. And what that means is with this one pillar, pillar 3, of designing and executing XPRIZE competitions, we are now doing some front-end work around laying out these strategies for the domains that we want to focus on, like space and exploration, or planet and environment, shelter and infrastructure, energy and resources, health and wellness. We look at these domains, but within these domains, we develop what we call these impact maps, like a roadmap. So not just one prize competition that will make a big, significant innovation breakthrough to solve a grand challenge, but what are the series of innovation breakthroughs required to make a massive transformative purpose in a domain like health and wellness? Okay, so we call that our strategic aspect of the foundation. We have an XPRIZE Institute that is focused on that. I'll share a little bit more about some of the work we're doing in that area, but just think of that as strategic context for the multitude of competitions that we can put into our repertoire to drive significant impact and transformational change in a particular domain. From there, we go into the second area, which is a gateway process to getting to a final competition. So we have a strategy, we have a series of prize concepts, but to determine which one we actually launch and if it's a feasible concept in that it will be optimized in the XPRIZE model, because not everything is prizable. So we vet these to determine which ones we put into launch, and we have the second pillar, which is somewhat of that quality control and that vetting process that we use to go from our strategy to executing a competition. And then the fourth area of the foundation is something very exciting that we're doing, and we're doing this more proactively versus reactively, is we're trying to scale the impact of an innovation breakthrough that we deliver through an XPRIZE competition. So many of you are familiar with the original XPRIZE, the Ansari XPRIZE, that put a private spacecraft into suborbital flight and back down safely and won a $10 million original XPRIZE. It was Richard Branson that was at the finish line that bought that intellectual property that launched and credited for launching the private space industry. That was somewhat organic. What we're going to do now is we're going to premeditate that as much as possible. So when we have these competitions that last for years, to really take moonshot breakthroughs to win these competitions, we are going to line up as much incentive factors as we possibly can besides the prize purse to actually scale the impact. And I'll give you some descriptions of what that actually entails. So in terms of the XPRIZE Institute, we are currently looking at a few areas where we have maturity, and we've developed a strategy and an impact map or a roadmap. For example, many of you are familiar with the work that we're doing in oceans. We have, to borrow Salim Ismail's term, we have an MTP for the roadmap or impact map around oceans. Healthy, valued, and understood oceans. To achieve that audacious objective, that MTP, we look at what are the grand challenges and the market failures that are preventing us to reach a healthy, valued, and understood ocean outcome. And we've launched in the past an oil cleanup XPRIZE that Wendy Schmidt sponsored. We then did a ocean health XPRIZE. Then we're doing currently an ocean mapping and discovery XPRIZE. And we're looking at oceans plastic and other concepts. So you see what we're doing is we're laying out a roadmap of a series of innovations that we think the world needs solved. By design, when we develop these roadmaps, we only put it into the XPRIZE impact map when we determine that traditional problem solvers won't solve these problems on the timeline the world needs it. That's our focus as nonprofits. So big problem, these are the big market failures, these are the innovation moonshots that we need to produce, and nobody else in the world is going to take care of this. So XPRIZE is going to crowdsource the world to see if the people of the world can actually solve these problems ourselves. And that's what the Institute has worked on. So we've been very successful in terms of oceans. We do a tremendous amount of work in that area, and a lot of value that's coming out of that. Another impact map that we're developing is through the sponsorship of Lowe's Home Improvement, and we've been working on this for about 6 months now. We'll be finished with this probably towards the end of the year, but we're doing a future of housing impact map. So what is the future of homes that are safe, affordable, and healthy? And you get into concepts like growing homes out of genetic reengineering of certain species of plants and other things to actually grow your homes, grow your infrastructure. You get into 3D printed and AI-built homes. You get into refugee housing. So we look at, across the board, what does the future of housing look like? What's the timeline the world actually needs a breakthrough, transformative solution set? And then we line up that roadmap. We vet to make sure traditional problem solvers, the government, industry, venture capitalists, startups, that they're not going to be focused on these solutions. Therefore, we're going to put it into our roadmap, and we're going to take it to the crowd and put it into the XPRIZE competition methodology. So those are some examples of roadmaps. I mean, we're looking at doing a sustainability and planet environment-related roadmap next year, as well as something in space. So 2018 will be a big year for us around the impact maps that we're developing. As I mentioned, after we put this impact map together and we have the 6 or 7 concepts in an area like the future of housing, we have a process in which we vet the concepts to determine which ones we actually put into the next phase, which is launching the competitions. Again, this is like quality control. It's taking these concepts and really kicking the tires and looking under the hood to see if we can develop a methodology and process that is conducive to an XPRIZE competition. Not everything works in an XPRIZE competition. You're talking about game mechanics. You're talking about crowdsourcing. You're talking about using prize theory, incentive competitions. It's a very intricate instrument that's designed through this methodology. If you can identify the right fit for that model, you're going to crowdsource an amazing breakthrough. But you have to do the due diligence to figure out if it's conducive for the XPRIZE model. So we have this gate process, and we have this Visioneers process. Some of the concepts that we're working on currently that are going through this process is we have a team funded by the government and some of the largest Chilean mining companies to look at mining that is done with zero waste, zero environmental hazard and damage. We have a team that's working on democracy. So this is the notion that with hanging chads and fake news and hacked elections and all this mayhem around our democratic process, could we formulate an XPRIZE competition that actually crowdsources teams to come up with more innovative, contemporary, progressive ways of thinking about how we have a functional democracy? Artificial intelligence being used to filter fake news, the blockchain be used for voting, those types of concepts in this methodology. So we have a team that's led by a pretty prominent political figure, Joe Trippi, who's leading that team right now. These are all concepts that we're vying to be our next XPRIZE. We have the government of Singapore, which is doing a team focused on cybersecurity. We have Clean Air, which is funded by one of our board members from China, with support from the government of China focused on clean air. We have Christine Harada, who was President Obama's chief sustainability officer, who's the lead for that. And so they're working on a clean air concept. And we have the Alzheimer's related XPRIZE design concept with one of the GSP, the Singularity University GSP graduates, Philip, who many of you are familiar with Philip. So he's actually leading that for us. You know, I would mention that every year I come to the GSP for Singularity University by invitation of Rob Nail and Karen and Will, and I actually talk to a lot of you that are part of the GSP, some of the alumni, because you are a good recruiting group to lead these concepts through our Visioneers process. So if any of you from the GSP or any of the one in this community has a particular passion on a concept that you think may make a good XPRIZE competition, come talk to us, because we might hire you for the 6 months to put a proposal together that you present at our annual summit, where we have 300 people vet those concepts and actually vote on which concept we move forward as the next XPRIZE. So that leads to the actual XPRIZE competitions themselves. And I'll share a few of the ones that we're actually, we've done in the past, as well as some of the ones that we've got in our pipeline right now. So overall, we've awarded close to $40 million in previous prize competitions. Starting with the Ansari XPRIZE, most recently, about 5 months ago, we awarded, after 5 years, the Qualcomm Tricorder $10 million XPRIZE. This was a 5-year competition, crowdsourcing the world. Anyone that could create a handheld device that weighed less than 5 pounds that could give you a diagnostic better than a board of certified physicians across 12 disease conditions. And we had 2 teams that came into the finals, 5 teams that came in the finals, 2 that were awarded large purses. And then the final team, which happened to be 3 brothers from Pennsylvania that worked in the ER, in the emergency room at a hospital, that happened to have computer science, deep learning, machine learning, and engineering backgrounds, that created this tricorder device that won that competition. That was the last prize that we awarded about 6 months ago. Some of the other things that are currently active, last year we announced in India, on the United Nations stage in India, with Xenia Tata, who works at XPRIZE, who led this, a XPRIZE for women's safety. You heard Naveen Jain speak, I think it was yesterday, who's on XPRIZE's board. Naveen and his wonderful wife Anu funded this women's safety XPRIZE. So this was a wearable that could trigger location-accurate scenarios and transmit alerts to responders that give a woman who is feared for her safety a technology and innovation breakthrough that would get her to safety. We launched in India the Water Abundance XPRIZE. Ratan Tata, who is on our board, put up the money for this XPRIZE. We have 98 active teams in the XPRIZE world. When you crowdsource the world, you get thousands of teams that register. We qualify them. We got 98 active teams. I'll pause here for a moment to kind of share with you how legitimate and relevant this model actually is when you get to work. If you can launch an XPRIZE and you can generate a critical mass, not a dozen teams, but hundreds of teams or thousands of teams, critical mass of rapid experimentation over the course of 2 to 3 years. So we design these competitions. We let these teams try and fail. We let them iterate so they can continue to work on their models. So critical mass, rapid cycles of experimentation with a lot of diversity. That's the key. People from all over the world, from different regions, people with different skill sets, with different backgrounds, from artists to engineers to biologists to scientists to business people. They all compete. And if you can get that spread, if you can get that diversity spread and get that critical mass spread and allow that rapid experimentation through one competition, you essentially, in the course of a couple years, are generating what organically would take decades to do. Because you're getting all these shots on goal from all these variations all at the same time. And that's the beauty of the model. You only pay the winner, but just the experimentation you see of all these different attempts through all these different lenses, that's the creativity and the artistry that you need in the model to actually crowdsource a winning solution. And if you really think it through and kind of do the reverse math on this, there are problems that won't be solved unless you do it through this methodology. At least not on the timeline the world needs it. There's really no more effective way. If you can get the incentive structure right to get a legitimate set of teams, qualified teams from around the world, that critical mass with that level of diversity and those different perspectives, with all that iterations of experimentation, generates, for a $2 million prize, we'll get $100 million of R&D in the course of 2 or 3 years from all that critical mass participating. And that's always how the model works. Matter of fact, that second pillar I mentioned vets to make sure we can get that type of critical mass, rapid experimentation, diversity. Otherwise, we won't launch it. It's just not going to make a good XPRIZE. And that's the methodology and the approach and the theory behind what XPRIZE does. We have a current active prize for $5 million funded by IBM, which is the AI XPRIZE. This is looking at AI for good. About 6 months ago in Geneva, Switzerland, XPRIZE and the United Nations had a major summit. Some of you probably were there. It was called AI for Good. We're probably going to do this annually. But this was the notion of, can we provoke the world to create and use this new exponential technology, artificial intelligence, in brand new ways that are seen as extremely beneficial for humankind? One of our biggest prize purses right now is our $20 million carbon XPRIZE with NRG and COSIA as the sponsors. This essentially is, after years of competition, if you can take your device and put it on a smokestack, and we're testing this with Governor Meade in Wyoming, put it on a smokestack, and if you can take the carbon exhaust and turn it into a usable product with a non-environmental damaging footprint, you win $20 million. And we've seen what some of the teams are looking at. Some of the teams plan on making a shoe out of the carbon. One team is planning on making beer out of carbon. I don't know what the alcohol content is that going to be. It sounds a little dangerous, but that's the idea there with the $20 million carbon XPRIZE. We also have our current ocean discovery XPRIZE. I mentioned that we've done about 3 or 4 major breakthroughs in oceans. Our current active prize is looking at the ocean floor. We know more about the surface of Mars and the surface of the moon than we do know about our own planet. We know 2% of the ocean floor is mapped. So this is looking at really bringing down the cost of being able to go out and map the entire ocean floor in a way we've never had. Because you can't manage what you can't measure. We have an adult literacy XPRIZE funded by the Barbara Bush Foundation and presented by Dollar General. What this is, we're working with the cities of Los Angeles, the mayor, Boston, and Philadelphia, I believe. Those are the 3 cities. We've identified thousands of adult learners. We're working with the Unified School District. These are adult learners that don't have the ability to read. And we crowdsource the world to come up with software that will go onto those adult learners' mobile devices, not new devices that they have to go buy, the ones they currently have, and teach them to a proficiency in reading. And so we're doing that hand in hand with the participation of the Unified School District of those 3 major cities in the adult learner programs. That's currently active. We have 109 teams. And one of the most exciting XPRIZes that we're doing, and I just love talking about this because it really is the quintessential example of when this model really works, is the Global Learning XPRIZE. This is Elon Musk put up the $15 million for this XPRIZE. There was a huge review of this whole thing on the BBC about 4 weeks ago. You can do a search on that. You'll find it on the BBC. But this essentially is going into Tanzania, identifying 4,000 illiterate children in Tanzania, working with the cultural model in those countries, working with the village elders, the village mama, actually going in and assimilating this into their culture. We worked for over a year with the World Food Program and UNESCO from the education group of the UN, and actually getting these villages ready. And the 4,000 illiterate children we've identified that don't have access to schools, don't have access to learning. They have to walk a day or so just to get to a school. So again, government, not going to build schools. Industry, not going to sell software to teach these kids in Swahili. There's no market for it. So we're doing this XPRIZE. Google has given us 8,000 brand new Android tablets, 2 per child, because we had 4,000 illiterate children. And then we crowdsourced the world and we said, okay, world, build software that will go on an Android tablet that can take an illiterate child in Tanzania in Swahili and in English to roughly 3rd grade proficiency in reading, writing, and basic math. If you can do that in 18 months, you win $15 million. We've just down-selected the teams from hundreds of teams. I think there were 700 originally, to now we just awarded 5 finalists $1 million each. And now this fall, their software will go on these tablets in these villages. Huge, huge experiment in conjunction with the government and the cultural sensitivities of the villages themselves. So watch out for this one, because this is pretty significant. Some of the remaining ones is we've got the $30 million Google Lunar XPRIZE. This is to put a spacecraft on the moon, travel 500 meters, and send back digital images. We have 5 teams after 8-9 years in competition, 5 legitimate teams that have launch contracts. Several of them have launch contracts. The competition ends March of next year. And we've got Israel, Japan, India, the US, and then the kind of a conglomerate of different groups as part of the 5th team. If you pick up the August issue of the National Geographic, the issue of this month for Nat Geo, National Geographic, the physical publication or online, it's the space issue, 35 pages. Most of the magazine, this is profiling these teams. Pretty incredible. Some remaining thoughts before I end the discussion here is we have some XPRIZes we're going to be launching. So Peter and I were just in Japan last weekend, thanking the executive team of ANA Airlines because they funded the Avatar XPRIZE. This is using haptic gloves, virtual reality headsets to be able to transport yourself into a robot somewhere else in the world to carry out your skill set and your capability. So it's transporting yourself, Ubering yourself, if you will, into a robot technology, advanced robot technology that can carry out a task, a rescue mission, a carpenter, transporting your skill set and capability. That's the Avatar XPRIZE. We're actually launching that on October 17th at the Paul Allen Institute on Science Fiction. We have another XPRIZE called the Iron Man XPRIZE. This is exoskeleton technology. This is a stroke victim, ALS, elderly, wounded warrior, people that have lost all their mobility, their communication, their manipulation, and their respiration. This is brand new exoskeleton technology that would give them that mobility and those skill sets back. And then the last one that we're looking at, which is working with Shauna Butler and Dr. Daniel Kraft, who were heavily involved. Daniel Kraft actually was the bold innovator that led this design for this. We're working on an early detection cancer XPRIZE. We're in the process of raising $50 million for this. We're actually getting very close, and we hope to launch this XPRIZE in the coming months. Deloitte did the original design work on this last year, or funded the sponsorship for this. So those are the active prizes, and then I'll close on just some of the things that we're doing in terms of scaling impact. Again, in the past, we'd have a big competition. Someone would win the competition. A lot of teams would try to win the competition, and we would kind of congratulate them, give them the purse, say thank you to everyone that participated. Now we're very focused as an explicit model on scaling the impact from these competitions. So I'll give you one example of that. When we awarded the Tricorder XPRIZE about 5-6 months ago, we actually announced some major initiatives to actually scale the impact. For example, Kyle Nell, who I think is probably at the summit here, from Lowe's Home Improvement, got up on stage and said to the winning team, as well as the 4 finalist teams who created these handheld medical devices, as soon as you were FDA approved, Lowe's Home Improvement will give you instant retail shelf distribution in all of our international stores. And then we had an executive who's on our board, very prominent individual from the China market, that got up on stage and said, okay, winning teams and also the teams that qualified, we will help you navigate the Chinese production manufacturing network to protect your intellectual property and get high quality production of these devices for you, and we'll personally pro bono help you with that service. We have Morgan Spurlock, who's going to do a full-length documentary on these teams. So you see what we're doing is, prize was won, winning team, 4 or 5 teams that didn't win but did an exceptional job. We're trying to create all this momentum for them. When a team wins an XPRIZE, they keep the intellectual property. As an XPRIZE, as a nonprofit, we're very pro-team. We're pro-innovator. Now we're trying to actively pursue advanced market commitments for them and anything that can help them be successful and scale their impact. That is kind of the report out to the SU community. I'll be around a little bit if anyone wants to approach, have any questions. To get involved, if you're interested, Amber at xprize.org is someone that can help you. And thanks for the time today. Appreciate it.